No, never. I'll never feel like I've arrived. I hope to never, ever, ever be complacent, because I think that that's one of the most.
Breaking news has just ripped through the courtroom like a lightning bolt after months of speculation, manipulation, and sealed proceedings. A judge has just issued a ruling that no one saw coming. Blake Lively's entire case has just been flipped on its head in a shocking legal victory that not only blindsided the prosecution but left her own legal team scrambling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. The courtroom was still the energy tense, cameras flashing outside like a war zone when the judge entered and dropped the bombshell in one swift motion. He vacated a previous key ruling, one that had formed the foundation of the prosecution's entire argument. With a cold, steady voice, he declared that new evidence had surfaced, evidence that had been unlawfully withheld by investigators, and in doing so, he didn't just weaken the case against Blake, he detonated it at its core. The gasps inside the room were audible. Her lawyers leaned forward in disbelief. The prosecution froze mid-note, and the gallery was instantly overwhelmed by the chaos of what had just unfolded. The evidence in question, a digital communication chain between two top-level investigators, revealed that they had knowingly failed to disclose contradictory witness statements and possibly altered the submission timeline of critical documents. What this meant in legal terms was simple and terrifying. It meant Blake Lively could no longer be held accountable under the current case structure, not because she was proven innocent, but because the case itself had now become compromised. Blake remained composed, sitting in complete silence, hands folded, but those close to her described her as trembling slightly from the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just a technicality, this was a complete reversal of fortune that could render months of legal warfare obsolete. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed to adjust their scripts. Influencers streamed in real 10 news tickers across every platform blared the same message: case flipped, judge rules in favor of Lively, while crowds erupted in fury, disbelief, and some in celebration, depending on what side of the truth they believed in. But this is where the story gets darker, because while the judge's ruling sparked headlines, what followed behind closed doors was even more disturbing. Within an hour, the lead prosecutor was removed from the case by internal order, and a previously sealed complaint was unsealed, showing they had been warned months ago about potential data tampering and chose to move forward anyway. That decision alone could lead to criminal charges, and now the focus had shifted from Blake to the justice system itself. It was no longer a matter of whether Blake would walk free. She already had one foot out the door. Now the question became who else would fall to protect her, or worse, who else had helped build the illusion of guilt that just collapsed in real time. This is only the beginning. As the courtroom emptied and news crews scrambled to make sense of the chaos, insiders were already leaking what had truly gone on behind the scenes in the days leading up to the judge's shocking decision. Private memos were now surfacing between senior judicial clerks and unnamed legal analysts who had flagged major inconsistencies in the timeline of key evidence, but those warnings were suppressed quietly, buried under procedural backlogs and misfiled notes. And now those buried truths had risen like a tidal wave, swallowing everything in its path. The documents that flipped the case were traced back to a secure cloud server that had been subpoenaed months earlier but mysteriously inaccessible due to encryption issues, until just days ago when an anonymous tech whistleblower provided the decryption key directly to the judge's chambers. And what he found inside wasn't just one contradiction, it was dozens. A pattern of negligence, if not deliberate sabotage. Timelines didn't match, file dates were altered, some statements attributed to witnesses didn't even exist in official transcripts. It was a legal minefield, and the judge didn't hesitate. He declared it a breach of due process. But the most unnerving discovery was a string of private emails between investigators discussing how to control the narrative ahead of trial. One line read chillingly: "Even if she walks, we win the public war." And that one sentence set off alarms everywhere, because it revealed something deeper, more calculated than any mistake. This wasn't just prosecutorial error. It was strategic media warfare, and now the spotlight had turned away from Blake Lively's alleged crimes and focused on the system built to convict her. Meanwhile, Blake's legal team, who just weeks ago had been torn apart by infighting and high-profile resignations, now stood united, basking in what could only be called an accidental miracle. But they weren't celebrating, they were watching their backs, because they knew this ruling didn't exonerate Blake. It only destroyed the case being used to break her, and that meant the fight was far from over. New charges could still come, a new investigation could still rise from the ashes, but for now in this narrow moment Blake Lively had just won the most unexpected legal battle of her life, and as she stepped into the black SUV waiting outside, shielded by heavy security and silenced the cameras, caught a flash of expression, not relief, not triumph, but something colder, deeper, as if she already knew this wasn't the end. This was just the reset. The city didn't sleep after the ruling. Social media turned into a battlefield. Hashtags like hashtag justice for truth and hashtag Blake walks again trended globally within hours, but underneath the digital noise, something much more dangerous was taking shape. Investigators, prosecutors, and legal experts from across the country quietly began circling the wreckage of the collapsed case, trying to piece together how something so massive had gone so catastrophically wrong, and more importantly, who had let it happen, because while Blake Lively had just walked out of court untouched, the trail behind her was lined with shredded careers, lost reputations, and now whispers of obstruction. A confidential source inside the district attorney's office confirmed that a full internal audit had been launched targeting every official involved in the chain of evidence surrounding Blake's case. The audit wasn't just about sloppy work, it was about corruption, a possibility no one had dared to speak out loud until the judge's ruling made it unavoidable. The same source revealed that sealed files included allegations that a key witness had been offered a non-disclosure agreement and a silent payout by a third-party entity believed to be tied to a high-end PR firm representing several other celebrity clients. This wasn't just a case unraveling, this was the fabric of celebrity justice tearing wide open. But as the system buckled under the weight of its own secrets, Blake herself was nowhere to be seen. No statements, no interviews, no posts. Her team issued a single-line press release thanking the court for its integrity and requesting privacy moving forward. But privacy was no longer an option, because with the case flipped, the public now demanded to know what the original case was hiding. Was it all fake? Was she truly innocent, or had the truth simply been buried under layers of procedural disaster? At the same time, a viral video surfaced showing Blake at a charity event just days before the verdict, laughing, smiling, completely unbothered by the storm swirling around her. Many saw it as tone-deaf, others saw it as calculated, a message to her critics that she never feared the courtroom because she always knew how it would end. But here's the twist: late that night, an anonymous email landed in the inbox of a high-profile investigative journalist. Attached were screenshots of internal communications between a former prosecutor and a private investigator referencing something called the firewall list, a rumored document containing names of protected individuals who were never meant to face trial no matter what they were accused of. And Blake's name was reportedly highlighted in red, bolded, and underlined. If that document is real, it means the case wasn't just flipped by legal error, it was never meant to be won in the first place. And now for the first time, people weren't just questioning the verdict. They were questioning the entire system that allowed it. The morning after the ruling, the courthouse was eerily quiet, but across the city, in private offices and encrypted group chats, there was a war brewing. People inside the justice system were turning on each other. The fallout from the judge's decision was more than just embarrassment, it was triggering full-blown panic. Investigators began receiving urgent notices to preserve all communications dating back over a year. Legal teams from unrelated cases demanded retrials, citing bias, corruption, and now the terrifying possibility of a protected elite tier that included Blake Lively was being treated not as conspiracy but as credible evidence. The term firewall list now echoed through every legal and political corridor, though no one would confirm its authenticity. The pressure to discredit its existence grew stronger by the hour. One former staffer to a deputy attorney general anonymously confessed that such lists do exist, compiled by firms hired to manage high-risk clients, usually celebrities, politicians, and billionaires. They aren't written on letterhead or stored in case files, but tracked across burner devices and buried in metadata fragments of protection, treated like currency. As journalists and independent researchers closed in on this mystery, they were met with stonewalls and digital interference. Emails vanished, servers crashed, 2 whistleblower accounts were suddenly deactivated, and a third person, reportedly scheduled to testify about internal suppression efforts, disappeared off the radar. Her friends claimed she was safe but unreachable, and then something truly shocking happened. A private forensic analyst uncovered metadata in one of the leaked screenshots pointing to an edit time that perfectly aligned with the judge's recent travel to a remote legal summit, suggesting that someone had planted or altered the documents just days before the hearing. The implication was staggering. Was the evidence real? Was it fabricated? Or was it selectively edited to force the judge's hand into collapsing the case altogether? Meanwhile, Blake's silence was becoming deafening. She hadn't been seen in public since the verdict, and now tabloids claimed she had left the country flying under an alias, using a diplomatic contact as her entry point into a private European enclave. If true, it meant she wasn't just protecting her reputation. She was running from something bigger than the law, and in a strange twist of irony, several of the same influencers who had championed her during the case began deleting their support videos after reportedly receiving cease and desist letters from unknown law firms. One influencer posted cryptically, "They're scrubbing everything we said like it never happened." But it did happen, and now the public wasn't asking whether Blake Lively was guilty. They were asking how many people had helped make her untouchable, because with every new leak and every name that surfaced, it became clear this wasn't just a legal victory, this was a coordinated takedown of accountability itself. As the days passed and the media circus spiraled into deeper obsession, one fact remained untouched in the chaos: Blake Lively had won, not by fighting the charges, not by disproving the evidence, but by watching the system collapse on itself in perfect sequence. Insiders now began to quietly admit that what had occurred wasn't just an accident of law, it was a masterstroke of legal strategy. Some even suspected that her team had orchestrated the exposure of the prosecutorial misconduct at the exact moment when it would cause maximum damage and make any retrial nearly impossible. A former paralegal who briefly worked with one of Blake's legal consultants anonymously claimed they'd been instructed to track every procedural delay, every minor error, every single digital inconsistency in the case file, and archive it off record. It was described as a blueprint of destruction, a slow, meticulous log of the prosecution's failures waiting to be weaponized. And when the final piece dropped, the judge had no choice but to invalidate the foundation of the case. But the question that terrified everyone behind the scenes was simple: how many other cases were being built on this kind of unstable ground? If Blake Lively's team could spot and weaponize these cracks, how many others could too? How many guilty clients would now walk free by mimicking this exact strategy? While public confidence in the justice system plummeted, the entertainment industry went into quiet lockdown. Studios pulled projects with Blake's name attached, major brands canceled ad campaigns. Executives refused to comment on record, but one insider admitted that even though she wasn't technically guilty, the optics were radioactive. But none of this seemed to affect Blake directly. According to leaked reports from private aviation logs, she had recently landed in Iceland under the alias Emily Frost, staying at a discreet eco-villa known for hosting embattled billionaires and fallen royalty. For Blake, this wasn't exile, this was retreat, a deliberate step into the shadows to regroup and wait for the storm to pass. And while she vanished from view, the internet only grew louder. Thousands of creators began piecing together timelines that had never made sense in the first place. Witness sightings that vanished, news stories scrubbed entire Reddit threads removed within minutes, all pointing to a narrative that had been shaped long before the trial even began. And then came the video, a 14-second clip dropped anonymously onto a dark web channel showing what appeared to be a private dinner months ago between Blake Lively and the very judge who later ruled in her favor. No sound, no timestamp, just blurry footage and a gloved hand pouring wine. It could be deepfake, it could be real, but its very existence was enough to detonate conspiracy theories across the globe. And suddenly, the question wasn't whether Blake's case had been flipped, the question was who flipped it for her, and what did they get in return? Within hours of the leaked dinner video hitting anonymous channels, chaos erupted across every major news outlet and social media platform. Fact-checkers scrambled to verify its authenticity, but tech experts were divided. Some claimed subtle pixel warping proved it was fake. Others insisted the metadata was too clean, too consistent to be artificial. Regardless of the truth, the damage had been done. The image of Blake Lively casually dining with the judge who later overturned the case burned itself into the public consciousness. Activists immediately called for a formal inquiry, while multiple legal ethics boards launched quiet internal investigations behind the scenes. 2 congressional aides confirmed that sealed subpoenas had already been issued to examine the judge's financial records and travel history. But what no one expected was the sudden resignation of one of the lead court clerks, who left behind a chilling final message posted anonymously to a whistleblower site. They knew about the video before the trial began, they let it happen. Overnight, the scandal widened from legal misconduct to judicial compromise, and at the center of it all was Blake Silent vanished untouchable while her former publicist issued a carefully worded denial calling the footage a fabrication and promising legal action against any outlet that showed it further, but the internet doesn't forget. A second clip appeared just 24 hours later. This time audio was included 2 voices, one unmistakably belonging to the judge and the other alleged to be Blake. Though slightly distorted, what was said couldn't be ignored. The voice matching the judge said, "You've got more protection than the president, just stay calm, we're handling it." Within minutes, the clip was banned from every major social platform. It had already been downloaded and reposted across encrypted forums and burner channels tens of thousands of times, and now the court of public opinion had flipped. Just like the case once divided between those who believed in her innocence and those who questioned it, most viewers now agreed on one thing: they had been lied to, not by one person, but by an entire system. Actors, producers, journalists, prosecutors, judges, all playing roles in a performance designed to keep truth out of reach. And while traditional media hesitated to make accusations, new media rose to the front. Independent creators began releasing multi-part exposes, tracing the financial connections between Blake's legal team and high-powered lobbying firms that specialized in manipulating digital perception, reputation laundering, and crisis reversal services. In one viral breakdown, a creator revealed that a senior partner at a law firm involved in Blake's defense once sat on the same private foundation board as the judge, raising questions no mainstream outlet dared to ask out loud. This wasn't just scandal anymore, this was a collapse of the myth that the legal system is blind, that fame and money can't buy silence. And now the world was watching to see what would happen next. The silence from Blake Lively's camp was no longer being interpreted as discretion, it was now being seen as strategy, a brutal, calculated refusal to engage with the spiraling narrative, knowing full well that any word, any misstep could reignite a wildfire in courtrooms, in boardrooms, and in the global court of public opinion. Because now the scandal had reached a place no one could control anymore. Not her lawyers, not her handlers, not even the judge whose voice had allegedly been heard, reassuring her. And that leaked audio, anonymous sources within federal investigative branches confirmed that several internal files have been locked down amid fears that individuals inside the justice system may have deliberately interfered with due process, not just in Blake's case but in several other high-profile trials from the last decade. An emergency panel was being assembled to review judicial impartiality in cases involving high-net-worth defendants and names connected to the entertainment industry had already been red-flagged. Meanwhile, inside Hollywood, the panic was spreading. Blake's closest allies were no longer picking up her calls. Studios halted all promotional material related to her past films. Upcoming streaming contracts were reportedly frozen pending formal inquiries, and one major agency wiped her profile from their talent roster completely. But the most chilling revelation came late one night when an investigative streamer exposed a pattern in flight logs between a private legal strategist known for case reversals and the judge involved in Blake's trial. Cross-referenced with anonymous payment transfers, the pattern formed a map of meetings, vacations, and one unexplained stop in Zurich a week before the key ruling from the court was issued. The implications were enough to trigger global headlines within hours, and as pressure mounted for the judge to resign, he instead filed a motion to temporarily recuse himself, citing personal threats and safety concerns, a move that only fueled the fire, because if there was nothing to hide, why walk away? Now at the same time, several former staff members who had worked under Blake's PR umbrella came forward offering sealed interviews to investigative outlets, claiming that months before the verdict they had been told to prepare a complete narrative reset that would go live immediately after the ruling was overturned. They described pre-written statements, photos, and even fake paparazzi sightings staged in advance of the decision. This wasn't just crisis control, this was a full-blown psychological. As the smoke cleared from the wreckage of Blake Lively's legal collapse, the world stood in eerie silence, not because the noise had stopped, but because the truth had finally become undeniable. What began as a courtroom drama turned into a full-blown societal reckoning. The image of America's golden actress, reduced to a symbol of everything broken, corrupt, and untouchable in the justice system, was no longer entertainment, it was history. Her silence spoke louder than any press statement. Her disappearance screamed louder than any staged apology, and the public who once adored her now carried torches, not in her honor but in search of accountability. Courtrooms reopened not to retry her but to investigate those who protected her, judges, Attorneys, publicists, all pulled into a vortex of legal and ethical collapse. Blake's name will forever mark a turning point, the moment when fame stopped being a shield and started being the spotlight for deeper scrutiny. This wasn't just about her, it was about the illusion that justice could not be bought, that truth could not be rewritten. But we all saw what happened, and no matter how many flights she takes, no matter how many shadows she hides in the world, will not forget, because now everyone is watching.